The crisis of the 3rd century was one of the most turbulent and chaotic periods in Roman history. Spanning roughly from the year 235 to 284 of the Common Era, it was marked by political instability, economic collapse, military uprisings, and constant external invasions. This era pushed the empire to the very brink of collapse. The turmoil began in 235, when Emperor Severus Alexander was murdered by his own soldiers during a campaign against the Germanic tribes. In his place, the legions proclaimed Maximinus Thrax, a general of humble origins, as emperor. His rise set a new pattern: soldier emperors with little senatorial support who ruled only through the power of their legions. In less than 50 years, more than 20 emperors seized the throne, most of them through military coups or outright assassination. This phenomenon became known as the Age of the Soldier Emperors, because generals so frequently rose to imperial power. Almost every emperor of this period was proclaimed by the troops, and later killed by them. The Senate's authority shrank into near irrelevance, while the throne itself came to depend entirely on the support of provincial armies. Rival generals often turned against one another, ignoring the empire's welfare. Such political instability crippled the central government, and weakened Rome's ability to defend itself against external threats. Many barbarian peoples seized the opportunity, intensifying their raids along Roman borders. Germanic tribes pressed hard on the northern frontier, while the Sasanian Persians became a constant menace in the east, culminating in humiliating defeats, including the capture of Emperor Valerian in 260. Rome's economy also entered steep decline during this period, weakened by continuous wars and disastrous fiscal management. Runaway inflation, fueled by constant currency debasement, ravaged trade and drastically impoverished the population. Insecure trade routes and crushing taxes added to the turmoil. On top of this, devastating epidemics, such as the plague of Cyprian that raged between 251 and 270, slashed the population, further undermining both the economy and the army. The combined effect was a severe agricultural crisis and a drastic shortage of available labor, in both cities and rural estates. Provinces, abandoned by an enfeebled central administration, began to splinter politically. This gave rise to breakaway states, most notably the Gallic Empire in the west and the Palmyrene Kingdom in the east. Both sought to establish independent administrations, openly challenging Roman central authority. In 260, after Emperor Valerian's capture by the Persians, his son Gallienus ruled what remained of the Western Empire but failed to stop the crisis. At the same time, the western provinces suffered heavy invasions by Germanic peoples such as the Franks, Alemanni, and Vandals. Feeling abandoned, local legions took matters into their own hands. Out of this chaos emerged Postumus, a military commander in Upper Germany. After repelling invaders and executing Gallienus's son, who was in his custody, Postumus was hailed emperor by the troops. He then founded what became known as the Gallic Empire. This state copied Rome's traditional structures. It created a regional senate, appointed consuls, and even minted its own coins. Its capital was set at Augusta Treverorum, modern-day Trier, Germany, and its main mission was defending and administering the western provinces. Though not inherently hostile to Rome, the Gallic Empire presented itself as an emergency solution to the central government's inability to protect the West. Still, Rome's emperors branded its rulers as usurpers, and several campaigns were launched to reclaim the territory. Meanwhile, after Valerian's capture, the rich eastern provinces lay vulnerable to Persian invasions and were virtually undefended. In this vacuum, the prosperous trading city of Palmyra stepped forward to safeguard the region. Its ruler, the Roman general Odenathus, won significant victories against the Persians and was honored by Rome with imperial titles. After Odenathus's assassination in 267, his wife Zenobia assumed power as regent for their son Vabalithus. Soon she steered Palmyra toward independence. Zenobia, a proud and learned queen fluent in Greek, Latin, Aramaic, and Egyptian, presented herself as the heir of Cleopatra and the Parthian kings. Under her leadership, Palmyra rapidly expanded its control, taking Syria, Egypt, parts of Arabia Petraea, and Anatolia. She even proclaimed herself Queen of the East, and styled her son as Augustus, an imperial Roman title. By doing so, she openly broke with Rome's authority. The crisis only began to turn around under Emperor Aurelian, who reigned from 270 to 275. Determined to restore unity, Aurelian first reconquered Gaul in the west and then turned to Palmyra in 272. Marching through Asia Minor, he defeated Zenobia's forces at Emesa before advancing to Palmyra itself. He besieged the city, and though Zenobia tried to flee and seek Persian aid, she was captured while crossing the Euphrates. In 273, after another failed revolt, Palmyra was sacked and its empire dissolved. Aurelian paraded Zenobia as a prisoner in his triumph in Rome, adorned with jewels and golden chains. Yet rather than execute her, he spared her life and granted her a villa in Tibur, modern Tivoli, where she is said to have lived out her days as a Roman matron. One of the most immediate effects of this entire crisis was the collapse of Rome's monetary system. From the mid-3rd century onward, emperors reduced the silver content of coins, especially the denarius, which had long been the backbone of Rome's economy. To fund ever-rising military wages, emperors struck vast quantities of coins with little real value. The result was crippling inflation, purchasing power plummeted, domestic trade shrank, and economic life was strangled. The Roman army, meanwhile, grew uncontrollably, both in numbers and in cost. Because emperors constantly feared rebellions, they tried to buy soldiers' loyalty with generous bonuses, even when the treasury could not afford them. Agricultural and artisanal production could not keep up with this spending, forcing the state to impose ever heavier taxes on civilians. This economic crisis drove Roman cities into decline. Many were abandoned or saw their populations shrink dramatically. The urban middle class virtually disappeared. Power and production shifted instead to the countryside, where wealthy landowners built vast estates worked by dependent laborers such as the coloni, who gradually lost their economic freedom. After nearly 50 years of political collapse, economic breakdown, invasions, and civil wars, the Roman Empire seemed on the verge of complete disintegration. But in 284, a new emperor rose with a bold plan for reorganization, Diocletian. Of humble birth and a long military career, Diocletian was proclaimed emperor by the troops after the death of Numerian. His reign marked the end of the so-called military anarchy and the start of the Dominate, a more centralized and absolutist form of imperial rule. Diocletian understood that the crisis of the 3rd century could not be solved by military strength alone. The empire itself needed a complete overhaul, targeting its most vulnerable weaknesses. In 293, he created a new governing system called the Tetrarchy. The empire was divided among 4 rulers, each responsible for a portion of territory but bound together by shared imperial authority and mutual defense. Diocletian himself oversaw Thrace, Egypt, and Asia Minor. Maximian took Italy, Africa, and Hispania. Galerius governed the Danube and the Balkans, while Constantius Chlorus managed Gaul and Britain. In times of crisis, all tetrarchs could combine their forces against a common enemy. The system was also designed to secure peaceful succession. The Caesars would succeed the Augusti, and new Caesars would then be appointed in turn. Remarkably, in 305, Diocletian voluntarily abdicated, an unprecedented act, alongside Maximian, allowing the Caesars to become the new Augusti. However, after his departure, the Tetrarchy soon collapsed. Personal ambitions and rivalries among successors ignited new disputes and civil wars, such as the famous conflict between Constantine and Maxentius. Even so, the lasting legacy of Diocletian's reforms was the recognition that a single emperor was no longer enough to govern such a vast empire. This realization paved the way for the eventual permanent split between the Western and Eastern Roman empires in the 5th century. Historians see the crisis of the 3rd century as a decisive turning point in Roman history. It marked the end of classical antiquity and the beginning of the late Roman Empire, an era whose political and social structures differed profoundly from those of Rome's earlier imperial zenith.